Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the IMTM 2020 live webinar session on fostering rural tourism in the Maldives. Mr. Zhu Jing will be the moderator of today's session. He is an expert on Asia tourism and a former regional director for Asia of the World Tourism Organization UNWTO since 1992. Mr. Ablogias, Chair of Maldives Pata Chapter, Tan Sri Dr. Ong Hong Pang, from former Secretary General of the Ministry of Tourism and Culture of Malaysia, Mr. Samiu Imad, Vice President of Guesthouse Association of Maldives, Ms. Jiang Jave, Assistant Director, Monitoring Center for Sustainable Tourism at Observatories, Sun Yat-sen University, China, Mr. Damcho Rinzin, Head Tourism Promotion Division, Tourism Council of Bhutan. A warm greetings to all. Looking at the rural tourism, it has always been an important part of the tourism industry around the world. It is evident that rural tourism contributes to countries equally financially as well as by creating economic opportunities, as such many destinations rely on rural tourism for economic progress. This has been the case for the Maldives in the past 12 years. Rural tourism paves way for commerce and complements through employment opportunities for communities who are struggling with the growing challenges for livelihood support. The community-based tourism or local island tourism here in the Maldives has been playing a significant role towards strengthening the livelihoods of the local community while stimulating and boosting community-based commerce. The transformation of traditional rural economies into entrepreneurial economies is a positive and critical transition by countries, yet a very complex process which requires much understanding. The individual entrepreneurial role in the field of rural tourism is the key to sustainable development. However, such understanding and identification of key factors in supporting such transition has been addressed by the World Tourism Organization. The WTO states that rural tourism is a type of tourism activity in which the visitor's experience is related to a wide range of products generally linked to nature-based activities, agriculture, rural lifestyle culture, angling, and sightseeing. I believe that these topics require discussion and understanding by professionals and academics alike to encourage entrepreneurs to become a medium for both national and sectoral progress and sustainability through innovative global initiatives. Now, I would like to hand over to Mr. Zhu Jing to start the session on fostering rural tourism in the Maldives. Mr. Zhu Jing.
Thank you, Ms. Shuna Khalid. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. In fact, today I'm quite excited in not only in the sense that I'm now seeing among the speakers all my good and old friends, but indeed, I'm excited. Look at me, and together with Dr. Ong, we dressed in red. Red symbolizing good luck in the Chinese culture. So from that angle, I'm super excited to be the moderator for this session, fostering rural tourism development in the Maldives. Now, as probably some of you have already learned, that the Republic of the Maldives and especially more importantly, the people of the Maldives have been very dear to me over many years. Indeed, probably my life has been very much associated to the sunny side of life of the Maldives. And I'm sure that this will continue to be so in the times to come. And this explains why I actually accepted with honor to be the moderator for today's session. Now, without any further ado, my duty is to introduce others rather than for me to speak. As you heard from Ms. Khalid, we have a very high caliber group of speakers listed in here. Let me start with Mr. Abdullah Gias. Please say hello to everyone. Gias.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are.
You know, he looks very unique, not only the hairdressing part, but I think for those who haven't been informed about him, he being the chair of PATA and used to be the use of tourism of Asia and the Pacific. So he has been very active in the industry throughout the region, and congratulations and thank you for coming today. Now let me also introduce Dr. Ong Hong Peng, who is the heavyweight of today's session, who used to be the former Secretary General of the Ministry of Tourism and Culture of Malaysia, truly Asia. Dr. Ong, please say hello. Welcome. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, hello everybody. It's good to be participating in this IMTM 2020, and I'm very honored to be one of the panelists. And it's also exciting to meet my good old friend Su Jing and all the colleagues. And this is a great opportunity to share our experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now let me switch to Mr. Samud Imad, who I think is a rising star when it comes to Maldivian tourism, because he is the Vice President of the Guest House Association of the Maldives. Mr. Imad, please say hello to everyone.
Hello guys, it's so good to see you all in on platform. IMTM always brings, very good contribution to the tourism of, especially local tourism to the Maldives. And hello wherever you are, and good evening, good morning, and good night.
Thank you, Mr. Ivad. I like your starting greeting sentence by saying, hello, guys. You are almost like Joe Biden, hello, folks. So thank you very much, Mr. Imat. Now let's move on to somebody who is very much known also in the region of Asia and the Pacific tourism, Mr. Damcho Renzing, who is heading the Tourism Marketing Department of the Tourism Council of Bhutan. And please, Mr. Damcho.
Thank you, Kuzu Zangpola. As my colleague Gia said, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It's my pleasure to be talking about how tourism contributes to happiness as part of IMTM. Thank you for having me. Someone I would really like to share our experience, of course, from the Kingdom of Bhutan. So it's my pleasure to be part of this distinguished panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Damcho. I love your dress. I still have one that I bought from the Bhutan when I was there. I really cherish the experience of visiting Bhutan. Now, last but not least, let's zoom on to the central position of my screen, which is the representative from China, Ms. Jiang Jiawei. And Jiang Jiawei is the Assistant Director of the Monitoring Center of the UNWTO Sustainable Tourism Observatories within the premises of the Sun Yat-sen University of China. Jiawei, please say hello to the audience.
Hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I can't wait to share our experience and listen to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see that your virtual background probably is the real background of your monitoring center. So we all look forward to go to learn from you about the monitoring center of how sustainable tourism can be monitored through the UNWTO indicators. Thank you very much. And as you have already heard from Ms. Khalid, today, our session is on the topic of rural development through tourism. And this is a topic, as far as the objective is concerned, is very much linked for me to two probably perspectives. Number one, you heard that this year, the entire international tourism community is celebrating exactly this very theme of rural tourism development, how the development in the countryside can be further boosted through the sector of travel and tourism. And more than that, not only that this is the theme for this year 2020, as far as the international tourism community is concerned, but increasingly our Asian destinations, the governments have been very much advocating on this very topic of rural development through the sector of tourism. And the government of the Maldives and the private sector of the Maldives are no exception. What both the Maldivian destination as well as the rest of Asia and the Pacific is concerned, what probably we aim to achieve through the attaching importance to the rural development through tourism is probably threefold. Number one, we would like to look at how we can actually maximize the social and economic impact of tourism and how the benefits can trickle down further to the community development. And in other words, how we can actually make this concept of inclusive growth of development to be applicable also to the tourism sector. What we also wanted to make sure as part of our discussion is how we can strike a balance of the social and economic benefits that we can derive from the tourism sector. And doing so, in such a doing, what we ultimately wanted to do, and you can hear from our subsequent speakers, we do not want to leave anyone behind. And if we earn the foreign exchange, if we generate the jobs and the income through tourism, we wanted the benefits to be spread over the overall spectrum of this society. So with this in mind as a setting of the scene, I would like to invite the first speaker, which is Mr. Abdullah Gias, to give us some idea about the Maldives when it comes to community development of tourism. Mr. Gias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zujin. Let me very quickly share my screen. Hope everyone can see that.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yes.
All right. Again, very good evening to everybody. I'm very excited to be on this webinar and part of this IMTM event. The topic, obviously, is, as Zujin said, is community tourism development, and I wanted to basically run you through or take you through how this applies in the Maldivian context and how it is working on a more global or on a macro level, and how Maldives is trying to relate or trying to embrace this. Because as I go through the presentation, you will know where we are at in this journey of ours. So the Maldivian tourism journey so far, I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of this, about Maldivian tourism, but I thought I will quickly run you through just a quick slides or a quick introduction about where we are. As you know, Maldivian tourism began in 1972. Tourism is the largest economic industry of Maldives. In fact, we have one of the world's highest GDP dependency on tourism. Whether you look at it, whether it is directly or indirectly, close to 80 to 90% of our economy depends on tourism, because so many other sectors are interconnected or dependent on this. As of August 2020, we have a total bed capacity of 52,460 beds, out of which the guest houses contribute about 10,133, which is about 19.3% of the total bed capacity, out of which the resorts contribute to 71.6%, and the liveaboards or the safari boats contribute to 5.7%, and the city hotels accounts to about 3.2%. As I take you through these slides, you'll understand how far the sector has grown and how this again applies in the Maldivian context. So what is community tourism development? I think a more technical term, or the term that a lot of people use, is CBD, which is community-based tourism. And I always like to show a definition that someone else puts forward. And there was one of the academics had put this in 1997. CBD is tourism that takes environmental, social, and cultural sustainability into account. It is managed and owned by the community, for the community, with the purpose of enabling visitors to increase their awareness and learn about the community and local ways of life. And again, very quickly, Murphy in 1983, much long before that as well, said community-based tourism refers to the local efforts aimed at planning, developing, and managing tourism-related opportunities. Now, if you look at the UNEP and UNWTO's characteristics that they have highlighted on the same topic, it talks about involving appreciation not just on nature, but also culture as a part of the visitor experience, containing education part of the tourist offer, generally but not exclusively organized to small groups by small or specialized locally owned businesses, minimizing the negative impacts of nature and social, cultural environment, supporting the protection of, again, nature, cultural areas by generating economic benefit from it and providing alternative economic income and employment for local communities. Again, conservation as well. So CBD in the Maldivian context, I would say this has been a tool that has strengthened the rural community's ability to manage the tourism resources while ensuring there's more local community participation. This is also aid in generating income, diversifying the local economy, preserving culture, conserving environment, and even providing educational opportunities. Now, in 2009 is when actually this whole explosion of guest houses started to happen in Maldives. Obviously, there was hotels or city hotels or some form of bed and breakfast in the past as well. But really, this is when it took off. And if you see in the last 11 years how this sector has grown on a tourism product that was dominated by one island, one resort concept, with in 11 years covering a market share of 19.3% of the total bed capacity today. And I think the whole concept of community-based tourism, the success of it speaks volumes. The fact that this is today's fastest growing sector in the Maldives. And I can tell you why this is, why Maldives has actually embraced some of the principles of CBD tourism in the Maldives. Globally, when you look at various success stories, and obviously from country to country, it differs. But some of the key underlying principles of CBD tourism is, or CBD is, to recognize, support, promote community ownership of tourism, involve community members from start of every aspect, promote community pride, improve the quality of life, ensure environment sustainability, preserve the unique character and culture of the local area, foster cross-cultural learning, respect cultural differences and human dignity, distribute benefits fairly among community members, contribute to a fixed percentage of income to the community projects. Challenges of CBD. Again, this is, I've looked at in a more macro level, but I think some of these can very, very much relate to our local ecosystem as well. Firstly, it adds greatly to the cost of tourism planning and development, lengthens the period needed to develop tourism plans, lack of coordination with sometimes central governments, lack of access to market information, lack of appropriate legal systems, whether it is to defend the community interest or participatory rights, lack of tourism expertise, lack of financial and human resources. Again, this is just not just Maldivian problem, but if you look at on a more global level, the challenges of this concept. About monitoring, CBD monitoring. Now, this is also very important about how important it is to monitor this sector, simply because with so much growth that is coming in, with the sharing economy, how well are we able to monitor this and see the progress as it progresses? So when we look at monitoring, it is important to look at the ways of how to understand how this is improving the effects on community. How even on whether it is contributing to sustainability goals, identifying areas of improvement, whether it is catering to the customer needs, change, understanding whether we are able to manage finances and internal operations. Ensuring social categories, including youth and women, are able to benefit from this, and how well are their participation from them, how much of the involvement of them is there. I mean, again, in Maldives, we see a challenge there, especially with women participation, and I think this is an industry that can embrace that in a more, in a bigger manner. Lastly is improving from the monitoring, how well we can improve this. Even right now, if you look at Maldives, the way our geography is and how well we are, or the way we are scattered, still the guest houses is focused on the centrally. And I think with understanding and monitoring this, we could be able to look at how broaden or how well we can make sure this is distributed across the outer islands as well. So what is the story elsewhere? I was just looking at two countries, rather because of the limited time. One is Sri Lanka. If you look at homestays and CBD, I was told from my research, it's about 62% of the total arrivals in 2019. Seychelles, if you look at bed and breakfast and CBD, that accounts to 48% of their arrivals in 2019. Again, the definition of these things and the context is very different in each country, and each country has its own features. Obviously, there's a global trend. I mean, today you look at Airbnb, one of the world's biggest platform that is able to aid in these accommodations for selling these accommodations for CBDs. Even a lot of international hotel chains are today moving towards this trend and embracing this. So, given the limited time I have, I will end my slides with some food for thought. I know this doesn't, talk so much about CBD, but about technology. But this is a very interesting slide. We see how, whether it is Uber or Bitcoin or Facebook or Alibaba, I mean, I wanted to emphasize on Airbnb. Today, one of the world's largest accommodation provider that doesn't really own any real estate. I mean, this trend, I think, is here to stay. And I think we are going to see this in the coming years, post-COVID. And I think this is only accelerate this further. So thank you very much. That is my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diaz, not only for your food for thought presentation. I think it is both food and the thinking part contained very much in your brief but very comprehensive presentation. I must say that I must congratulate you and the Maldives as a whole on the pioneering efforts that you have been making when it comes to community-based tourism. Because as usually, whenever we talked about the Maldives, people would very much linked with the upscale resorts and not so much talking about the community-based tourism as a mainstream concept. But from what you are telling and from what your presentation, including the example of Sri Lanka and Seychelles, this is not only the in theme, but this sooner or later will indeed represent the mainstream thinking of the tourism sector. Why we are doing tourism. We're doing tourism not just for the money, but we're doing tourism for the community as a whole and for the society as a whole. Thank you once again. Now let's move on to the second speaker. We are looking from the Maldives to the international perspective. And we start with the presentation by Tan Sri Dr. Ong, who has been the anchor of tourism and the economic development of Malaysia in your previous head, and your initiative on homestay program has been worldwide known, in addition to your Malaysia Truly Asia marketing success. So let's hear from Tan Sri Dr. Ong.
Okay, thank you, Sujin. What I'll do now is I'll try to share the screen, which would give a better idea of my presentation. So, okay, I think, can you see the screen now? So I'll
Yes,
start by saying welcome to all the participants and everyone who has logged into this live webinar of IMTM 2020. And it's a pleasure to share Malaysia's homestay experience. And this picture is specially chosen to give a sense of welcoming mood and a sense of opening up, a sense of what you expect when you visit a village homestay in Malaysia, where you have the traditional Malay costume, the traditional welcome ceremony with the bunga mawar, which is used in festive occasions, and the kompang, the musical instrument. So that is the start to give you a flavor of the welcoming reception and welcoming atmosphere of a Malaysian homestay. Okay, we are trying to get to the next slide now. Okay, basically, I'd like to just give an overview, and I'm glad I'm taking off after Mr. Abdullah Gias, because he has given a very good presentation of the community-based tourism, and that this is where an example of Malaysia, which is also on community-based tourism, which is the Malaysia Homestay Program. And it was launched in 1995, and over about 25 years, it has grown into a very successful program. And I hope to share some of these success stories and what the homestay program in the form of what Malaysia is doing to everyone who is tuned into this webinar. And it is part of a rural tourism master plan. So I think this is important because we have a master plan, and homestay is one of the flagship programs that would drive the rural tourism development. And this is an important initiative as alluded by Mr. Abdullah Gias. Okay, and this homestay program focuses on lifestyle, culture, and experience. It's not just merely accommodation, but it's more than that. So that is what we're trying to brand our Malaysia homestay experience. And you can see pictures of people enjoying their time here in the homestay with the joget lambat dance, it's the Malay traditional dance, and the kuda kepang dance, which have some social interaction and some fun at the homestay. And Malaysia homestay is about warm hospitality, and you can enjoy the local lifestyle and the local cuisine, staying with the host families, having a meal together, and doing many other things and experiencing the rural lifestyle. Okay, this is one the more closer snapshot of the playing the kompang. And playing kompang is significant for the local culture here, because especially during weddings, it's used to welcome the bride and the bridegroom and all that. So it creates a festive atmosphere. So that's one of the fun things that you get to do at the homestay. And also there are some economic activities. It depends on the village. Some are in a rubber plantation, then you get a chance to experience rubber tapping. Some are at the paddy fields and get a chance to know what it's like to do some harvesting, to do some planting, depending on the season, and also enjoy the tranquil and the nice scenery. Also, there's a coconut, as you know, in tropical climate, I think where you have lots of coconuts. So get a chance to actually witness how the users of coconut and how the importance to the rural economy. And then we move on. I think earlier I just talked about, give a flavor of what the rural lifestyle experience like. And then I think we need to actually value add as we progress over the period of the homestay program. We felt that we need to actually go into value added activities. So like this example in Sungai Pasu homestay, around beside their homestay experience income, they do also have this Mullo flower project. Mullo flower is a very important flower which high commercial value. So they plant this, I mean, in addition to the homestay program, in their courtyard or in their gardens and all that, or in a plot of land, and it has a very nice fragrant smell, and it generates additional income for the homestay participants. We also have, like, for example, in Kuala Medang Homestay, Kuala Lipis, I mean, they do have the raw materials for making sango noodle. They have the salad kind of fruits, so they convert that into fruits. So these are income generating activities in addition to the homestay program, the mainstay. Okay, and this Felda Semenchu Homestay, which is in Kota Tinggi, Johor, they do, there's lots of coconuts, so why not convert, value add to this and convert the raw coconuts into coconut jelly, and also their coffee beans convert into instant coffee drink. So these are some of the extension to this homestay program. And the added advantage is not just to bring additional income, but also this in itself is an added attraction to the homestay visitors. Besides the traditional homestay lifestyle, they get to visit these projects as well. Okay, that is a very quick snapshot of the homestay program in economic activities. I'll now just zoom into the experience of Miso Walai Homestay. The reason why I chose Miso Walai Homestay, because it is one of the success stories, and it's something that would be useful for reference and as a guide. And if there's some areas or some things, initiatives that can be adopted and to the various homestay programs, then it might be useful and also like some kind of food for thought. Basically, this Miso Walai Homestay, it started, from 1996. You can see that, they just have a makeshift office and start from, very simple beginnings and all that. But in 2016, just 10 years later, they have expanded rapidly, and because of high demand and because of what they offer, the programs and all that, and they even have a training center where they do have training for the youth and those homestay participants as well. So, but what is this homestay special is the way they've been run. They form a community cooperative, which they call Kopel in the Malay language or Bahasa Malaysia. It's Koperasi Pelancongan. It's a tourism cooperative. So this cooperative provides structure and better management for the homestay operator, and it also be able to scale up and provide employment to the locals. And this cooperative too have access to microcredit and provides a dividend or income generation for the shareholders. So it's based on the cooperative concept. But the other interesting initiative is the MESCO initiative, which is the forest habitat restoration. I'd like to, with this background, I'd like to move on to the next slide, which will show you a big picture of how this is Miso Walai Homestay is about, and what are the elements and involved and the ecosystem of Miso Walai Homestay. Okay, if you look at this, this Kopel, this cooperative, is not just looking at homestay, but they're looking at bigger picture, which is conservation and ecotourism. So, and you can see the ecosystem and the activities which are like conservation. COPEL provides manpower for conservation in terms of reforestation program, lake forestation, and then the package services like ecotourism, homestay, wildlife watching, river cruise, eco-educational programs. But to make this happen, there are a lot of players and actors and organizations involved. For example, they have the Sabah Forestry and Sabah Wildlife. They also with the NGOs, the Kinabatangan Tourism Association, and also besides that, they also have an important segment which is the volunteer tourism to do works of sustainable tourism, responsible tourism on conservation. So you can get a sense that this homestay program can be well organized and also need to be supported by the relevant organization, and also have the activities that are suitable for the homestay program, because Mr. Walai is in the Kinabatangan area, which conservation and sustainability are very important. So I'll stop here and then I'll go to the next success story, Desa Muni Homestay. The Desa Muni Homestay is in the state of Pahang. Sabah, Mr. Walai is in Sabah. So Desa Muni Homestay, why I highlight this is because Desa Muni Homestay is the first homestay that was established in 1995. So over the 25 years, they have expanded and they have grown, and they have actually been very successful. And it's also an example that shows that it is sustainable. From the first day until the present day, they have been doing well and they have been growing on a sustainable rate. And what's special, if you look at, is that they also have innovative ideas. For example, you see the logo there, we have Homestay Malaysia. So Homestay Malaysia is, when we talk about homestay, is that the tourist or the guest stays with the family of the host. So we also, it has been found that some of the guests, prefer their privacy. They would like to have the experience of the village lifestyle, the experience, but they would like, when they retire, when they want to rest, they want some privacy. They want to some kind of accommodation where they prefer not to stay with the host family. So that's why Desa Muni introduced what we call the kampung stay. Kampung in Malaysia is called village. Okay, so that's called kampung stay. So now we have an extension. In Desa Muni, if you like to stay the host family, you stay in a homestay program, and they have a package. That's where the value creation and the income generation comes in, where you have a homestay package for those who want to stay with the family. But for those who want to experience the village lifestyle, but would like to stay in their own accommodation away from the family, then they stay in what we call the accommodation called kampung stay or village stay, and also there are packages for kampung stay. So that is the innovation. I'm just giving a glimpse of how extensions to the homestay can be done, and also to attract a bigger market, a bigger number of tourists. So that is the sense of Desa Muni and the story of Desa Muni Homestay. Okay, for the efforts of the Malaysia in this homestay program, Malaysia was awarded the UNWTO Ulysses Award for innovation in public policy and governance, the Malaysia Homestay Experience Program. Okay, this is the last slide. The reason why I chose this slide, this is to show a picture, to leave you an image that is powerful, that the homestay is not just about accommodation, and homestay is not only about income generation, about value creation, about employment creation, but homestay can also contribute towards conservation, responsible tourism, and sustainable development. So this is based on volunteer tourism in the Miso Wildlife Homestay. On the picture on the left, before at this Kuala Cowboy, not cowboy, cowboy, Kuala Cowboy area, before the conservation or mascot initiative, you can see there are lots, the plots of land that's cleared and all that. So, but you look the picture after that, where they have the planting of trees, reforestation, it has come green and and it's beautiful, and it's good for our biodiversity, it's good for our environment and sustainable development initiative. So homestay can make these such things happen. So we have the right governance structure, we have the right initiative, and the right program and the commitment. So homestay is a good initiative. So with that, I thank everyone for listening to this Malaysia homestay experience, and I hope it is useful for everyone, and also some food for thought. As Mr. Abdullah Diaz has mentioned, I also like to coin that or join in his idea of sharing and giving food for thought. So with that, I conclude my presentation. I hand over back to Mr. Suji.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tanshri, Dr. Ong. And indeed, well, thank you for the precious time that you have shared with us today. Very, very rich in content. And I think it will take us a lot of time to digest. Good thing is that many things will be put on the social media, so we can go back to all the specific examples that you have presented to all of us. Thank you so much. And just two very brief comments. Number one, about the investment. Whenever we talked about rural development through tourism, community development, guest houses, we always think wrongly about big bucks and US dollars investment. It's not just about that. Indeed, many of the product developments has very little to do with the monetary terms. You share a meal, you look at the local cultural heritage. All of these are extremely attractive to international tourists. And I'm sure this is very much applicable to the case of the Maldives, whereby those upscale tourists, they don't want to only stay in the resorts by themselves. They wanted to visit the local communities and see the real life of the people. And this is where we can sell our products, not necessarily with a big investment. This is the first comment. And second, I noted that your government has initiated this. It's a very much central government-led initiative, and with the proper framework of rural tourism master planning, without which I don't think you would have achieved what you have up to today. So, of course, there are many highlights that I want to point out, but due to time constraint, let me move on. Thank you once again, Dr. Ong. Now back to the Maldives, and let's look at a specific product. And let me invite Mr. Imad for the presentation on guest houses. Mr. Imad.
Thank you. So let me share my screen to all the visitors in the webinar.
By the way, I'm very bad in time running, and I will fail my duties. So let's be a little bit conscious on the timing part.
Thank you. So, well, my focus today is on development challenges for the guest houses. That we see today that guest houses are not what we call as local tourism. Now it's transforming into a multi-story boutique hotels. And in fact, our government has decided that we will be labeling the guest house industry as the boutique hotel industry. So therefore, I would like to highlight some challenges that upscaling the guest houses comparatively to the resort industry right now. So the first thing is that the challenges in small island nations, there are huge challenges. According to the World Bank, since 1978, we are a party of World Bank, and there is, if we talk about developing sustainable tourism or developing local tourism in local islands, we have very less financial instrument, and the land valuations are not so good either, and the limited infrastructures to mega developments are another major stoppage for the small nation development. And next ahead, we have the unresolved problems that we have so far on rate parity. That we talk is rate parity is the key factor compared to the resorts and the local tourism guest houses. Now that we see that when we upscale the resorts and further we decide whether how are we going to sell our property, we see that some of the resorts are undercutting and selling in a very lower costs. And then the star indexing is not good. We see that some of the guest houses are featuring a 5-star service, I would say, with private butler services. And then what about we are being given 3-star? So I will move ahead to more slides and share you the resolutions that I have in my mind. And if you compare the expenses to a resort, it's far greater compared to any guest house running. So how we can solve this puzzle, how we can actually challenge to the rate parity puzzle in the industry that make the guest house industry a profitable industry to everyone invested. It is to write the governing policies. In fact, we are already working with the government to give ideas, exchange ideas, to write the resorts and guest house in 2 different chapters of the Maldives policies, so that we can understand that what are the minimum or the maximum rates that we could upsell our guest houses in the future. That makes our investment much more secure for people who invest, especially the foreign investments here. So another big shot is that who is going to finance to the projects that are now scaling in the Maldives, in the rural communities. Well, rural communities are limited in terms of investments. So what we see today is that there are many investments by local families that needed much more support from the financial institutions to develop into a boutique hotel industry. So we are looking into a scale where the bank and the financial institutions are going to give more finance, and this is also in progress with the banks and the government authorities to decide whether how are we going to focus on developing the rural communities to upscale their market. And now what people are saying about this, they do not have the infrastructure to cater the guest houses that they are scaling today, because they are scaling today what we call as boutique hotels. Now, we do not have financial facility for local tourism development. Of course, we have some facility, but we do not have sufficient financial facility which needed to be catered to go into a boutique hotel market. And another bigger challenge is that we needed skilled employees, a generation to support the scale development in the local tourism community. And lastly, that we have started to see a trend when it comes to managing the guest houses, managing the boutique hotel, the accounting or the financing or creating the budget, or probably or preferably, I would say, the financial awareness among the businesses, which is very important. That we see today, many guest houses are closing down, many guest houses are not operatable. Why? Because they do not have a good fiscal policy within themselves. So it is important for the guest houses and guest house owners to have a very good financial awareness of their sector. And in a conclusion, I would say that like I said, the public awareness is another thing. And when we come into rural growth or rural community growing, we needed the basic instrument to grow, such as finance and the infrastructure, to equally build the opportunities to the community tourism, like Mr. Gias highlighted already. So, and now tourism has become a hotspot of major islands in the Maldives, especially from South Atoll, South North Atoll, and it's being marketed everywhere. So I see that if you really want to upscale the industry, we have to create some uniformity in our investments in order to bring a much more scalable business and a much more prosper investment to the foreign investors and the local investors in the Maldives. Thank you so much, all visitors, and thank you. So I will hand over to Zoo. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Imad. I like very much the angle from which you have made this presentation, brief but subtle. And I must congratulate you being a very good representative of a trade association called Guest House Association. And this is where a representative would usually pose those challenges and for answers. If I may, probably these, your presentation are zooming at 3 angles, and I wanted later on during our discussion for all the speakers to have some discussions. Number 1, he mentioned about the guest houses on one hand and the resorts on the other may be written in 2 different chapters in government policies. So when it comes to policies, probably both Damcho and Dr. Ong can share some of your experiences with him and with the Guest House Association as a whole. When it comes to also the second part that you mentioned about the financing part, I noted from the presentation of Dr. Ong about the microcredit and how that will have worked. And I think Jiawei is also going to mention some of the financing part when it comes to Chinese cases, especially in remote villages, how you do the financing. And finally, Mr. Imad, if I may, when we are talking about prices of resorts and vis-a-vis guest houses, we're talking about 2 different segments. So segmentation is important in the whole process when it comes to promotion and marketing. If we're not aiming at the right actually market, then we're not targeting the right people to be attracted. So perhaps segmentation, finance, and policy can be further debated at the later stage. Now let's move on. Thank you, Mr. Imad, once again. And let's move on to Mr. Damcho Rainsing. And I think his presentation will be very happy one, because that's the country, a destination where happiness is a place. Mr. Rainsing. You need to unmute yourself, please.
So once again, a very good evening from the Kingdom of Bhutan. Briefly, we want to share the overall governance structure of tourism. But of course, we have to keep in mind that what is our national goal? So how do we align tourism to our national goal to make it more inclusive for the local community? So basically, I want to talk about this today. I think it's very important for us to actually understand how tourism plays a key role in in benefit sharing and have an inclusive rural communities. So this is basically, so my presentation is going to be on happiness through tourism for local communities, and not necessarily having a tourism product to benefit out of tourism. Can there be a different framework for tourism that the local communities can benefit, that the whole citizen can benefit? So basically, it's going to be on this. I want to start with the concept of gross national happiness. So I was Googling this morning and said, look, what does Google say about, I put gross national happiness, and they were saying It's a global indicator of progress that measures sustainable economy, social development, and includes environmental, culture, and psychological well-being. And I was very happy because now the Google has taken this up to the next level of from Bhutan to the global indicator or a measurement of happiness. So this is our national conscience. This is our national moral sense of how the whole country should be looking at. And it recognizes all aspects of human needs for happiness, be it spiritual or material, physical or social, right? And this gentleman serving popcorn to children is the architect behind the whole idea of gross national happiness. And he says GNH rather than GDP should be the principal yardstick to measure progress. We know that GDP is more on the size and health of the economy, and GNH is now, it's actually an inclusive concept to measure the happiness of everybody. And these are two of my favorite photos. On the left of the screen is this man cooking for school children, and being a football fan, and to see him play football with the children on barefooted is actually something very exciting for me. But what does he say about GNH? He says GNH is development with values. So we're talking about values of fairness, the values of equity, the values of harmony, the values of compassion, you know. So in order to have a happy nation, we have to have all these values go in line with the national philosophy of GNH. Now, where is our government looking at? How is our government looking? This is our national goal. So our goal for government, for our nation, is not only a prosperous nation, not only to make income through tourism, but also for a happy nation. And for us to be a happy nation, it's just much more than making just money out of let it be tourism or other activities. Now, let's take an example of where GNH is on the top of the mountain, and how will tourism achieve the whole idea of happiness, you know. This is the guiding principle for tourism for Bhutan. So high value, low volume. So we are talking about the whole concept of less is more. For a size of Bhutan, I think we have to really, I mean, even if also talking about rural communities, we probably have to talk about less is more. We cannot have people overrun the communities, because that's not sustainable. So the whole idea of this guiding principle for tourism is high value, low volume. So our tourism is looking at responsible and at attracting responsible and mindful tourism, and of course getting the best value out of it. So it's a win-win for the host communities, and also for the tourists, because tourists would like to go to places where they welcome, they feel very much part of the experience. So the whole tourism structure is guided by this principle of high value, low volume. And of course our vision of green, sustainable, inclusive, and a high value tourism. So here the green is not just about protecting nature. It's much more than that. It's being responsible as a host communities, and also being responsible to visitors. And of course, sustainability is big, and inclusive. I think this is quite important when we're talking about the rural tourism. You know, the benefits that rural communities generate out of tourism. I think the word inclusive is quite important. So this is the guiding vision for us in terms of moving forward. Now, this is Mountain Gangka Finsum, and it's the highest unclimbed mountain in the world, and it's because mountaineering is banned beyond 6,000 meters in Bhutan. If tourism was everything, if money was everything for us, we would make a lot of money letting people climb this mountain. But our government has said local communities are important. They worship such mountains as abodes of gods. But also there is other environmental aspect to it, sustainable aspect to it. Because if you let a lot of people climb a virgin peaks like this, I think it's not sustainable. There's garbage issues, there are litter issues, there are other issues, environmental issues to it. So we have to find a way of how does tourism ensure that the whole happiness is achieved for the nation. So, I mean, local communities' happiness is much important in this case, right? So we can make money, but would the local communities be happy if we really let people climb this mountain? Similarly, the other opposite example is this. I mean, the missing, because of lack of time, let me answer the question of what is missing in this valley. Usually it's there in most valleys. It's the electric poles, you know. So here, this is called Phobjika Valley, Gangti Valley. And this is the nesting place for black-necking crane, the endangered black-necked crane that fly from Tibetan Plateau to here for certain months. And there's certain areas in the valley that people can't go. These are protected, conservation. So here, the whole idea of GNH, the gross national happiness being, looking at a wholesome way of achieving the happiness for local. The electric poles are put underground, is quite expensive, but for the benefit of the cranes. So the cranes have been put first, and this is a wonderful example of where the rural communities thrive. Rural tourism is thriving at the moment, and there are quite a lot of homestays here that benefit out of such a model. It's actually, this whole valley is benefited out of the overall conservation policy and framework. So are there frameworks like that that support, that sustain the rural communities? This is one of the questions that I actually wanted to ask the other colleagues. Now, it's very unique when actually a tourist wanted to travel to Bhutan. Like I said at the beginning, everybody has the right to benefit out of tourism, and that includes to a large extent for Bhutan, the rural communities. So when you visit Bhutan, a person must pay something called the Sustainable Development Fee, which is $65 per person per night. That's not tax for services availed. That's just sheer amount you have to pay per person per night. And this money is used by the nation for free education, free school, free healthcare services, and I think, of course, a lot for the rural developments, for road network, other rural development activities. This is the framework that ensures, the rural communities are also benefited. Not just, for example, this person in the photo is carrying a luggage of a tourist. Not just somebody like him benefits. Not just somebody like him who is involved in tourism is benefiting out of tourism, but to make sure that we don't do this. We don't have profits privatized and loss socialized. So the whole governance structure of tourism for Bhutan is looking at how can we make sure that the profit is also socialized, and everybody it's a beneficiary of tourism, because brand Bhutan, the whole idea of brand Bhutan, we are looking at can a lot of people benefit of tourism, and that includes the rural communities. And if you actually look at the performance of tourism is number one foreign exchange earner for Bhutan, and it's the number two revenue generator for Bhutan, second to hydropower. So if you don't get the structure right, only few will benefit, and we forget about thinking about rural communities. I think they don't want to come any close, because they would not have the resources, they would not have the knowledge, they would not have the education to benefit out of tourism. So in case of Bhutan, are we looking at something that ensures that tourism actually is benefiting quite a lot of other people, and even those who are not directly involved in tourism? This is something that what Bhutan is looking at. And this is a simple way of how we ensure that tourism is actually well managed and well distributed. So when you visit Bhutan, in addition to the $65 that a person pays, you must use a Bhutanese licensed tour operator who plans and who makes sure that people stay in the right places, people interact, people go to the right place, and tourists have the best experience by paying upfront for number of nights they stay in Bhutan upfront, and having this agreed itinerary of how many days they want to stay in Bhutan. So this is a summary of course, a summary of the governance structure, the inclusiveness of the tourism system, including mostly, of course, the benefit sharing model for tourism. So thank you, Zujing. I think this is something that's just a summary of how Bhutan actually is looking in terms of making sure that we are happy through tourism, of course, for the local communities. And I want to repeat that not only those who are directly involved in tourism, but also indirectly or not at all involved in tourism are benefit out of tourism. Thank you.
Thank you, Damcho, for your excellent presentation. As I already thought, you never failed me as an eloquent speaker. Let me quote a few sentences from your presentations. You said, everyone has the right to benefit from tourism. Beautiful. You also said, as a principle, the government is developing tourism with high value and low volume. Beautiful. You also said, among many others, less is more. All of these are more than Shakespeare's English. I think that this is the very much highlights of what we are discussing. In essence, what you are telling our audience is that happiness is linked with economic development, and progress has to be measured by the index of happiness. No matter how much money you make, if you're not happy, then the purpose is not achieved. And further zooming onto that, and also, as you said, that we must think about the community first. We must think about the host first. You being the marketing director, you're not thinking from the demand side first. And I like that, because until your people are happy, how can you entertain the guest? So this whole relationship between host and guest is the essence of your presentation. Thank you very much. Last but not least is our youngest presenter of today, Ms. Zhang Jiawei from China. Now, I think you will share some cases about a different framework of rural tourism development through rural tourism development in China. But let me also, before passing on the floor to you, is that the rural tourism product in China, to me, is also a part and parcel of the overall expanding domestic tourism of China. So let's hear from Jia Wei, what she has to say. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Xu Jing, and hello, people from Maldives. This is Jia Wei from China, and it's my pleasure to share with you today China's cases on rural tourism development, poverty reduction, and rural guest houses. The first case I'm going to share is the case of Chongduge village. The Chongduge village is located in Henan province, and which is traditionally a less developed area in China, and it became a quite famous and popular rural tourism destination through a government-led poverty alleviation model called Happy Farmers Houses. The village is characterized from which you can see quite standard happy farmers houses. You could probably call it a rural guest house. It offers experiences of spending a very cool summer holiday in rural areas. It is especially attractive to retired groups. They will stay there for 2 to 8 weeks, renting a room by a very good price, having ecological local food, enjoying natural environment. And you can see the photo, it's not a high-end equipped room, but quite clean, and the price is very good. Actually, before 1999, the average annual income for residents in the village was $60 per person. People lived in very limited farming, like planting bamboo, or they were struggling for food. But then with the development of tourism, their annual income increased to minimum as $8,000 per person per year. So you can see from the photo the differences of their living situation before and after tourism development. So from the experience of Chongduge village, actually we can see the importance of having a very motivated and visionary political leader for a very undeveloped destination. In the case here, when the local government decided to develop tourism in the 1990s, there was lack of understanding of tourism industry and tourism planning. The local people didn't understand why tourism could be the way of changing their lives. So the deputy town mayor played a very important role. He was the one who convinced many locals to follow the tourism planning, and he also helped to raise funds for infrastructure construction, and he took local government officers to visit other destinations in China to see how others are developing tourism. So it is quite important to have a local political elite for destinations quite remote and lack of education or understanding of tourism. Then, as many people mentioned, the construction of infrastructure is very essential for destinations like Chengdu Village or many rural areas. One of the reasons of the locals that they didn't have confidence in investing in tourism was because the road was terrible, the infrastructure was very poor in the 1990s. And of course, the guidance and support from government needs to be continuous. At the beginning of the development at the early stage in Chengdu village, the government actually planned and dominated the tourism development. They registered a government-owned enterprise and played a very important role in constructing tourism-related facilities responsible for daily operation. And also government guided and regulated the business of the villagers, how they operate their guest houses. Then with the development, further development, the government entrusted private investors this previously government-owned company. But of course, with the villagers are richer, they have more power in financial rights, so they got quite big conflicts with the private investors. At that time, the government role became important again. That's why I say that guidance and support from government needs to be continuous, and always government has to pay attention to the local development. So Chengdu is one of the first outstanding successful stories of rural tourism development in China. And the second case I'm going to share with you is the Azheke village. It is a new model initiated by Professor Bao Jigang from Sun Yat-sen University. It locates in Yunnan province on the terraced rice field. The local people are ethnic group called Hani people. They live in traditional houses called mushroom house. And the village you can see in the photo has spectacular landscape, but it is one of the poorest village in China. So the new model initiated by Professor Bao was based on its amazing landscape, very unique traditional houses you see in the photo, and ethnic group characteristics and traditions. The team helped the village to establish a tourism company formed by 70% shares for villagers, 30% shares for government, and the university will have intelligent input, but no economic benefits. And they set 4 rules for the development of tourism. 4 baselines: no renting or selling houses to outsiders, no external capitals to be invested, no disorder management by the villagers who at the moment they don't know how to, or they know very little about tourism, and no damage to local traditions as it is a key attraction to tourists and the essential lifestyle to locals. So the university offers intelligent input, human resource support, strategic tourism planning, and traditional and training for local people here. You can see they are teaching them how to write, how to speak the common tongue, and the government will provide support in terms of policy, regulation. They will help to raise the financial funds, and they will improve the infrastructures. And the villagers will learn how to operate the company by themselves, such as accounting, maintenance of house, and cleaning. So most of the part of the tourism income actually goes to local villagers, as they have 70% of shares. And since the establishment of the tourism company, actually this initiative is very new. It started by the end of 2018. And the village already celebrated the dividends allocation 3 times. In total, each family got 5,400 yuan in 6 months. From March to August 2019, it is about 900 US dollars per person. Before tourism development, the annual income for each family was about 2,000 yuan. So in less than 6 months, they doubled their income by developing tourism. Now the villagers are, of course, very confident that tourism is the right way for locals to develop. And of course, from this new model, there are many benefits that we can share. All employees are local. The university team trains them how to sell tickets, rooms, how to clean their houses, the streets, how to recycle the garbage, how to write, how to speak the common tongue, and they teach the children to protect the environment, to be very polite with the tourists. So the housing and living conditions have been greatly improved. And with the arrival of tourists, young and middle-aged population who were working in other big cities, they are returning home because there are work at home now and very good jobs offering to them. So this also solves many social problems. Everyone is having more sense of responsibility as owner of this beautiful place. The third case I am going to share with you, also the last case, it locates in one of the most developed cities in China, in Zhejiang province. You can see the photo. It is actually a mountainous area with very beautiful landscape, wonderful natural resources. However, with the development of guest houses, which are called homestay inns, the natural resources become less important, and the homestay inns become attractions themselves. Mm-hmm. From the photos, you can easily tell the differences of the level of houses between the first case and this one. This is focused on high-end, economically developed source market. According to the statistics from the destination in 2017, there were 691 registered homestayings at that year, and among them, 327 rate 65 US dollars to 200 US dollars per night per room. So it is quite high. And 77 homestayings rate more than 200 US dollars per night per room. So this is a very high standard. And the destination received more than 6.5 million tourists in 2017. This case is quite special as it is in a very economically developed area. The residents have capacity of big investment, and the consumers also have capacity of higher expenditures in accommodation and leisure. The population is educated as well, and probably they themselves have experience in traveling around the world, and more artistically in construction and decoration, as you see in the photo. And what we can learn from this case study, for example, the tourists who go to Muganshan can stay in the homestay inn for days without visiting the real mountains. But you can see and feel the nature resources in the homestayings. So the cluster of guest houses become the tourist attraction themselves, replacing other tourism resources around the guest houses. And as you may know, there are many big websites in China which you can book your accommodation and your travels. However, with higher and higher commission and other restrictions, hotels are facing very high cost when they are selling through these websites. Therefore, the homestay inns in Moganshan Mountain formed a homestay alliance. They created their own channel of sales, and it is a better way of maintaining guest house and guest relationships. The power of words is very important, more important than ever these days. So these are good sides, of course, from this case study. But of course, a coin has two sides. While the tourists are happy with the homestays, the local villagers have less participation in tourism industry if they don't run a guest house, because the tourists don't leave the homestaying itself. So the interaction between the local culture and tourism becomes less and less. And from the photos, you can also see many houses look quite similar. So we have to be careful with offering very diverse experience. It can be a topic in the future. How can they maintain this type of homestay in the future in a more sustainable way? So that's my presentation for all today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jia Wei. Thank you very much for another rich presentation. But of course, China is like a continent. You can spend days talking about just one single destination like China. But let me also highlight just one as a comment about this whole idea of comparing between the remote villages, starting from scratch and with nothing to start with the tourism, and to another extreme high-end upscale, the third case. So in other words, there are different forms of rural tourism, both for the mass tourists as well as for the upscale tourists. And I think one of the other point that you wanted to emphasize is the wise man approach. You called it as local political leadership, but what I sensed from it is that you cannot at the beginning depend only on the peasants, the farmers, because they have no knowledge about the importance of how tourism can bring to the local communities. So as a kickstart, probably you need a few wise men approach into that. And as a whole, China has been a success story when it comes to poverty reduction. And through tourism, according to statistics, 17% of reduction programs are due to tourism sector. So this is a very high percentage considering the size of the country. Now, without further ado, we are 25 minutes behind schedule, but Ms. Khalid, with your kind permission, at least we should have about 20 minutes of our discussion. So let me, not wasting our precious time, let me go straight forward to our deliberations part of this rural tourism webinar. Let me start with Dr. Ong, and probably supplemented by Dam Chiu, relating to Mr. Iman's question about policies, how the policies when it comes to rural tourism development should be different from other products of tourism, from other resource development. Perhaps you can share what has worked and what has not. Dr. Ong, please.
Okay, thank you, Sujin. I think that's a very important question, because if you look at the very nature of resorts development and the very nature of guest houses or homestay in rural settings, they are different, operational model. So naturally, we need to have different policy guidelines for that. For example, the 5-star, the resorts will have we have the hotel rating, resort rating, and they do have the support level will be different because they are very much be able to self-sustain, and they also have the knowledge and capacity to do their operations and all that. So what we are doing is just more of standards and hotel rating and providing the policy framework from that perspective. But for the rural homestay or guest houses, like for example, what determined in the Maldives, then there's a bit more of hand holding that's required. And we also hear examples in China that, and also examples in Bhutan is similar. So the policy framework would be one that how do we actually nurture this homestay program or the homestay operators so that they become successful. The policy framework will be that they will have to have like a proper standards, what are the guidelines, the do's and don'ts, and then they have capacity training program. And then also alluded to what are the common infrastructure that's required and all that. So those are the basic infrastructure support that comes from the government. So I think just in a nutshell, so I tend to agree that since the business model and the operations and nature of the businesses and the level of capabilities are different, so we need to have different policy perspectives and policy prescription guidelines for the two different operations. Thank you.
Thank you. And perhaps some legislative, writings when it comes to this particular segment of guest houses should be done by the Ministry of Tourism of the Maldives in coordination with our trade associations. Damcho, please.
Yeah, I think a specific example of homestays. I think in Bhutan's case, slightly different from other international destinations in the sense that, you pay a minimum upfront and you must stay in the government or office certified accommodation facilities. Now, homestays are only allowed, we have a guideline for homestays. Homestays are only allowed in places where there are no luxury hotel facilities. And of course, the whole goal of the homestay is actually let the communities benefit out of it. And probably the homestay is the only business at the moment that I know doesn't have to pay taxes. You can have homestays in those places where there are tourism accommodation facilities deficient areas. Without paying taxes, they can make money. But this is how our office and other partners support homestays. They put in money for sanitation, basically, of course, supporting purchase of toilet facilities. Then also, of course, giving them knowledge sharing experiences, even to the extent of taking them to nearby countries, of letting them see how these people in other countries run the homestays professionally, like Nepal. I think there was only one case in Thailand, going to Thailand, and letting these people I think some of our colleagues talked about area of lack of knowledge for the homestay farmers. So for them to be able to conduct the operation of homestays in a professional manner, because our tourism, like I said, tourism system is slightly different. So we're talking about a minimum required service that we have to provide to the tourists because they're paying a minimum cost for this. So this is how, in terms of the structure, the policy, the support, the Kingdom of Bhutan actually works for homestays.
I think more than for policy formulation, I think you also need a set of standards, technical standards that you can use when developing guest houses. And in this context, I think Dr. Wong would agree with me that the set of standards for homestay initiative in Malaysia has now become the ASEAN 10 country regional standards that probably you can use as a reference for the Maldives. Dr. Ong, you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I think the mentioned that standards, I think you, Sujin, you're familiar with the ASEAN Homestay Standard, which was actually an initiative that we shared with the ASEAN member states and has been adopted. And also to support that, we also have the ASEAN Homestay Award. And every year we have each country will nominate those that meet the standards, those excellent homestays that program in the various ASEAN countries. They will be provide the homestay awards as an inspiration and encouragement for the excellent job that they've done. So I think you're right on that aspect. Yeah.
Any reaction from Mr. Imad before I pass on to Mr. Gias for the next question?
Well, I think I pretty much agree with all of you that we need to have a set of standards that define a guest house, that defines a resort. that defines a city hotel or a boutique hotel. So this is important for us to understand and to standardize the products that we have in the market today. So I think I've got good ideas right now. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Imad. And I think in this sense, not only that people from other destinations can make a reference to you, but also international organizations like UNWTO, where I used to work, can also provide certain technical assistance when it comes to planning, to policy formulation, as well as technical standards in the specific area like guest house. Abdullah, you know, I'm sure you know more than I do. Sometimes we are the victim of our own success. And in the context of the Maldives, you have been the star of tourism in Asia and in the world when it comes to upscale resorts. What makes you to pioneer on the efforts of rural tourism development or community tourism development? Because I remember back in even in the 90s, while you were succeeding in tourism in high-end markets, there have been also some negative social cost as a result of your own success, especially when it comes to working conditions for your local employees and the fair distribution of the wealth generated from the tourism sector. What do you have to say in this sense when it comes to community development? Has this actually helped in balancing the both ends? Mr. Gias.
Yes, firstly, that's a very, very interesting question. There could be, I think, another webinar just based on the topic itself, because it's debatable, very, very, very heatedly. I mean, it's a lot of people on both sides talk about this, but I think these are two different silos. I believe that it's too specific or two different market segments that can coexist in the same destination. Why I say this is because we've seen other success stories around the world, whether you look at what Dubai is doing or you look at some of the big high-end destinations in Europe. I think it is something that can work. And again, I understand Maldives traditionally 48 years have been globally branded, has been the platform or what they call the playground of the rich, and that is basically part of the Maldivian branding. But I think at the same time, with what's been happening in the market in the last 11 years or in the last decade, and given the challenges that we have had, I think we are still partly learning, and it's a learning curve for the locals as well, especially when you see, I mean, post-COVID, especially when the islands are reopening, we see the locals and the councils, how the government or the tourism ministry had to work with them just to get their consensus on opening up for tourism. So basically, we've just gone back to square number one, and it's very interesting. And we have to, I think, be mindful about the local values. We have to understand Maldives is still very much a conservative country in a lot of our deep roots. But I mean, specifically, like I said, it's a very interesting topic, and I, like I said, have a lot I can tell. But on a more general way, that's what I could say, that it could work, and it is working so far. Since July 15 to now, we've seen the highest number of private jets in terms of arrivals into Maldives. At the same time, after reopening for the guest houses, we see that number also improving. So yeah.
Exactly. I think lying ahead, of course, today our discussion is not really on the reopening or recovery from COVID-19, but certainly this is where challenges will be. But let me go back to the community development or as a whole, or guest house in particular. to strike the balance between the two, it's not necessarily when we talk about community development, it has to build new hotels, new resorts on those inhabited islands. What we also need to be careful about is how we can nurture the entire supply chain of all the dots where demand is needed, where supply is needed. For instance, the transportation sector, for instance, the local veggies, if you can grow in the villages. And all of these are part and parcel of community tourism development, not necessarily always physical investment into a new resort or a physical structure of tourism on the islands. Let me come back again to Dr. Ong, and also I would like to encourage Jiawei and Damcho to be on this next question. It's about investment and finance. I think it's always been a challenge, and you already heard from Imad repeatedly saying about that. How does this whole microcredit really worked when it comes to helping the local villagers? I'm talking about starting from scratch in remote areas when they don't really know how to do it when it comes to finance. Any thoughts, any light to share, Dr. Ong and Jiawei and Damcho?
Okay, thank you. I'll just be brief.
Before you start, sorry,
Yep.
you were
Yep.
heading the National Economic Commission, so beyond tourism, you also handle the financial part.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's right. You look at my profile. Okay, I was actually with the Economic Planning Unit, the Prime Minister's Department for 8 years. So we look at development budgets, and so financing is very key to this kind of a program. Okay, the one aspect that we look at is when we have the Rural Development Initiative. So the Economic Planning Unit does provide some allocation. So these allocations are to provide for the basic infrastructure in the rural homestays. For example, access road, community halls, ensure that those homestay participants have proper toilets and all, but basic needs. So the key word is basic infrastructure and common facilities. So those are, and also to ensure that they meet the minimum standards. So those are very important, and come to standard, we need to have auditing and all that. So, okay, I'm just giving this to give a backdrop of the setting. Okay, basically, I think Sujing, you rightly pointed out, when we talk about homestay, we're talking about low investment, high impact. The reason why is that it's the homestay houses, the families, they have extra rooms. So we don't need actually big investment. So only the toilet facilities may need to be upgraded, and that's where the government give grants to like 3,000 ringgit to upgrade their facilities. So it comes in the form of grants and access road and common facilities, because like when a big groups coming to the homestay, they need a community hall for some community activities, culture activities. So those are provided by the government. So I would think that in terms of finance, how to manage the finance, like we need to also have the capacity building. So homestay first is a voluntary program. So and then we have some guidelines. We need minimum 10, homestay villages, homestay participants, a minimum to in a homestay to have the size, the minimum size to actually provide that kind of homestay experience, and also have a group, a participation activity. So, but then the financing part is actually from the government, and so there is minimal finance. But how do they manage finance is key, because then we have the basic homestay training program where they have 1 week of training on the do's and don'ts, how to manage accounts, how to do marketing, how to interact with hosts and all that. So the financing part, and where do they get access to microcredit in case, let's say they want to do packages, they want to buy vehicles to provide transportation and all that. So the microcredit schemes are available. So this under the SME microcredit scheme by the SME bank. So I
It
think
is
those are,
government led. It is
yes, so
government.
it's government led, yeah, right.
Mhm.
So basically government led, and so one side is the government led, and one side the government also provide them the capacity building training program on the homestay training and the essentials of home, how to run a homestay program. So I think that would give a flavor and what we do
you.
here.
Jiawei, probably you wanted to share about the Aja experience, starting from nothing. How did it work when it comes to finance?
Actually, mainly at the beginning, the government invested in infrastructure improvements. And their own so-called mushroom houses, it's not very suitable for visitors. They don't have appropriate toilets, the showers. So the government teach so-called the villagers how to make it more comfortable for the tourists or visitors. Actually, in the case of China, the governments we are working with or destinations, normally there are two ways that they get the villagers to invest in tourism. First of all, even if they have money, they don't know how to invest in tourism, right? They don't know how to build a appropriate guest house. So you have to show them what is good for the tourists, what do they like. Even though you lived in this house for years, but the tourists don't are not accustomed to use it. So the government will
if you don't guide them, then they will build very modern houses in a remote village, which will actually stop the tourists from coming to that place.
Exactly.
That will defeat the whole purpose.
Yeah, or they never revisit. So the government will take the villagers to outside to visit actually hot places where guest houses are very good. Tourists, they like the destinations and so on. That's one of the ways the government is doing. The other way is they invite someone who already have a very successful homestay and who are interested in this destination, and they will talk to them if they want to invest in this area, and the government will rent in a very low price a house to the owner so that they can make one of the model or example to the villagers. Okay, you can make it like this, and how
Can
to
you elaborate on one of your slides which says no renting and no selling? Can you elaborate a little bit? Just 1 minute.
Yes, that's for the Ajaka village because many private investors, they think they have money. So they come in and destroy traditions and they make a cluster of mushroom houses and visitors don't like because there's no culture in it. So they set the baseline in this particular plan to avoid such problems. But they do have
important key. I think it's very relevant to the Maldives that the local ownership, including investment, has to be guaranteed before any external collaboration is invited.
yes.
Sorry to cut you short because of the time constraint. Let me go to Damcho.
Thank you. I think just straight, I think in line with Dr. Ong, the primary financing is the government. If you're taking example of for Bhutan, if you're taking example of village, we call it village homestays, VHS. And our criteria, like I said, one is you can't be in the populated tourism accommodation facilities area. It has to be in rural communities where there are not many of this accommodation facilities. The other criteria is you can't build new. It has to be there's a criteria of having to have your own old houses, because we are looking at a village homestay and you can't create a new village homestay for in our context. So that is, of course, so we don't really require a lot of investment because you already have a house. But we, like I said, the support is in terms of providing hotel toilet facilities, know-how in terms of managing it, knowledge and information to manage it. But the other thing I want to share with you in terms of the rural communities, of local communities benefiting out of tourism, and how do you finance this? For example, a tourism product in the local communities, or maybe a tenting area where, there are certain places in Bhutan, especially community-based tourism. Tourists pay about, let's say, about $2 per person per night. That goes into the village development fund. So things like that, to initiate projects like that. How does Bhutan work? Of course, like I said, government's the primary financer, but also one of the, I think, the successful model is working in collaboration with other agencies. It's international agencies and intergovernmental agencies like the Department of Forest and Park Services. You have this, and then there's the other agencies. So in terms of financing, I think a lot of times it's if you're looking at tourism local companies product, is the government led in collaboration with other international agencies, like even the UN agencies. Sometimes they fund for the benefit of poverty reduction. So that's the approach that Bhutan in terms of financing is taking.
Damcho, I've been to your country a few times, and I noticed that you were talking about renovation of old houses, and according to certain building codes, in order not to destroy the traditional style of the Bhutanese houses. Would you agree that in the case of the Maldives, perhaps some of these guest houses, they also need to give certain building codes in order to have a Maldives style guest houses across the country?
Very much, very much. I think Imad's presentation earlier about price parity, and there were other issues of, I think there are certain ways probably you can take care of to things like that. I have never been to Maldives. I'm still waiting to go to Maldives. But I mean, the architecture requirement for Bhutan is very strong. You build a house, and if you don't meet the basic architectural requirement, you don't get other amenities connection. That's how strong it is. I think that's the preservation in terms of like the overall the preservation of the overall aesthetic look of the destination. That's how. So I'm probably Maldives. I think if you're starting this homestays, because if you're just starting, then I think there's a lot of especially requirements you could put if you're really not wanting to have so many homestays. For Bhutan, we don't really want to have a lot of village homestays because that's not really the primary experience that we want to give. That's something that's supporting the rural community. So of course, yes.
Well, it's been excellent in our discussions, and due to time constraint, what I will do is the next two things before I do a 1 minute wrap up, because you said everything already. I would like to give the floor one more time to all our speakers for your burning question or burning point. 1 minute each person. If no question, no point, a warm greeting to our audience. And I will again start with the same sequence from Gias, then pass on to Dr. Ong, and all the way down. Now, Mr. Abdullah Gias, last point.
Yeah, rather than taking a lot of time, I just want to take this moment to thank everybody. It was definitely eye-opening, especially the speakers from other countries, even Imad's feedback. Definitely learned a lot, so thank you very much. I hope that we can also encourage the happiness and going forward, not just look at GDP. I'm always excited to speak to someone from Bhutan, so thank you very much, Amcho. Thank you.
Tanshri, Dr. Ong.
Okay, thank you. I'll just say that, homestay tourism is all about creating happiness. So I think that for successful homestays, I'll just leave with 3 key words. It's policy, partnership, and facilitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. I'm already smiling and happy. Now let's come to Imad.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that we need to continue to be sustained, and we need to continue to be developing a sustainable tourism in rural communities, where we understand to give a share to the community always. This is my message to the whole community of tourism. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Imad. And Dam Cho, your Shakespeare statement.
I mean, I like the fact that you said Shakespeare. I think from what I've said, probably it may sound like everything's perfect in Bhutan. It's not so. I think we have a lot of challenges. But I think the conviction of looking in future is something that I really admire of the tourism industry of Bhutan. A lot of things, some of the things people would disagree of, how you want to sustain, because you want to make money out of tourism. But is money everything? So I think the conviction for me of working for tourism for quite some time is quite important, of seeing the future, of not compromising the present and seeing the future. That's quite important. Zujing, did you say you can ask question as well?
Yes, please.
I have one question. Of course, thank you for the opportunity. I have one question for Jerry. I think you had this tourism model of, it almost looks like one of the models. I think it almost looked like it all depended on tourism. What happens in a situation like this, where there's no tourists at all? There was one village, I think you said everything was dependent on tourism. If that's true, then what happens in a situation like this? And this is the worry for Bhutan.
Well,
I
it's
think
chicken and eggs in the basket in one or all. But perhaps me being the moderator, I should direct it first to Dr. Ong and then to Gias, probably.
Okay, I think I didn't quite catch the question.
What Damcho is saying, what happens if we have no tourism at all due to situations like the pandemic, ongoing pandemic? So what do we do, and what is the message here?
Okay, I think basically what happens in the situation when there's no tourism, that's a very difficult question and a very challenging to answer. I think basically, like for example, when you talk about what is basically tourism, that's the core question, and how do we actually get ready for the pent up demand for tourism when the situation returns back to normal. And actually, the other thing is like when, for example, the tourism sector is really affected by this pandemic. So what are the new business model given the new normal? What can be done to actually sustain tourism? So that's how I give it.
So it's more. Yes,
I want to clarify my question. My question to Jerry was this: it's in one of the models, out of the three models she presented, it almost looked like this village, the whole village was fully dependent on tourism, and this is the worry for Bhutan. We don't want that, especially the rural tourism. The primary for rural communities is either agriculture or something else. Tourism is supplementary. This is the approach we are taking. But in one of the tourism models that we presented, it almost sounded like everything was dependent on tourism. And if tourism crashed just like now, what happens? That's the question for Jerry. Thank you.
Let me see. First of all, Damcho, you are a naughty boy. At the very end of our session, you're raising challenging questions like this. But let me also be frank with you. This will not happen. Tourism will take place in different forms, and not necessarily inbound as we speak, because most national borders are closed, but movement of people, movement of travel is and will take place in certain shapes and forms. And that is unless Jiawei and Shuna have anything to add, and also Imad. If not, then let me move on to last but not least, Jiawei, usually lady first, but now you're the youngest, so lady the last and the best.
Thank you. It's good to be the last one to talk, so I can say I agree with them all, and I share the same thoughts. And thank you very much. Tourism is definitely a happy industry, sustainable industry, and a responsible industry. And next time, hope to see you in the Maldives in person. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank everyone. Before I pass on the floor back to our organizer, just wanted to say that we've been discussing not just about rural tourism, not just about tourism or specific product like guest houses. We have been talking about how we can, as a human being, attain the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals set forth by the United Nations. So we should not forget about that. And of course, one session is not enough, and with the continued support of our organizers, perhaps we can do a series of such seminars with other destinations, chip in order to have more interaction with our Republic of the Maldives. And with that, I thank everyone once again, and back to our organizer, Ms. Kali.
Thank you, Zujing. This session has been, really informative, rich and inspiring for me, especially on the rural tourism development. I can see that there are many initiatives that can be, adopted and replicated here in Maldives. And to highlight some, interesting points like gross national happiness, responsible and micro-tourism, mandatory minimum packages, aligning tourism to national goals, taking rural development into consideration, and importance of segmentation in destination marketing efforts, how tourism contributes to benefit sharing, and also make people happy to make guests happy. And then looking at the sustainable development fees, like a minimum pay and approach, and then dividend allocation to villages, government and institutions, and maintaining the island life concept and culture here in Maldives, which is very important for the guests that are coming in to the local island tourism. And then, like local politicians, wise men approach, different policy guidelines for different segments like resorts and guest houses. Um these are very interesting points. I actually noted down everything. And then a big thank you to all of you, all the panelists, and Mr. Zujing for moderating, making this webinar a reality at the first place in IMTM 2020 platform. I'm sure the participants can take home much from your expertise that you have shared. I wish you all a good evening. Thank you so much.